Chapter 03 Ranking, Crystals, and Chaos. The students were gathered in one of the Academy's largest halls. The floor shimmered with complex magical circles, forming geometric patterns that pulsed with a steady golden light. There was tension in the air. Many looked excited, others nervous, but no one really knew what to expect. Kane watched everything with his hands in his pockets. His eyes wandered around the room like he wasn't paying attention, but he was. When he looked down at the floor, he couldn't help the thought that crossed his mind. Identical to the Academy map at the start of the tutorial. Same layout. Same hall. Same symbols. Seeing it in real life was weird and nostalgic. On each student's wrist was a black bracelet covered in magical inscriptions. The device wasn't just a score tracker. It was also the key to enter the space created by the Academy, a suspended plane, separated from reality, as the professors called it. Of course, it wasn't a real world. Not even the headmaster of Vehart could do that. But with the help of artifacts and mana catalysts, he managed to create something that felt real enough, with all the dangers that came with it. An impressive achievement. Marco walked over and broke the silence. "Hey, what do you think the test area's gonna look like?" Kane kept his eyes forward, his expression flat. No idea. A lie. He knew exactly what it would be. He had played that tutorial hundreds of times. It was a magical forest filled with hidden zones, ruins, and monsters of different ranks. But telling Marco that would raise some weird questions. And what would last-minute info really help with anyway? He glanced at his bracelet for a moment. So, if we take a serious hit, this thing pulls us out, right? According to the professors, the device was linked to the user's life force and the artificial space of the Academy. If someone got hurt badly, something truly dangerous, the system would automatically bring them back. The Vehart uniforms also had magical reinforcement. If that broke, the bracelet would trigger an alert. It was just enough to give people a false sense of safety. But Kane knew. The forest wouldn't go easy on anyone who treated it like a game. Without warning, the magic circles flared. A strong light filled the hall. All right. Let's begin. In the blink of an eye, they were gone. Back in the Academy Central Hall, a man watched a giant magic screen in silence. The headmaster of Vehart had neatly combed gray hair, calm dark eyes, and a steady expression. He wore a black coat with silver detailing and carried the air of someone who had seen many generations come and go. A professor stepped closer and asked casually, "Sir, do you expect anything specific from this class?" The headmaster didn't respond right away. His gaze remained locked on the projections in front of him, showing different areas of the artificial forest. Students had just arrived and were already moving between the trees. The professor pointed to one of the screens. "That's Raiden Velmar, son of the Velmar family from Orine. He's already fighting." The screen showed the boy slashing through creatures with his enchanted sword like he was born for it. His movements were precise, fast, and confident. He clearly wasn't there just to participate. He wanted to dominate. On another screen, Elena Raventhal was rushing through the trees, dodging obstacles and scanning her surroundings. It looked like she was searching for something or someone. Maybe a strong monster. Or maybe just a real challenge. Other students, heirs of well-known families, took a more careful approach. Yen, for example, moved calmly, studying every part of the forest like she was analyzing the world itself before making a move. And finally, there were also those who stood out not because they were strong, but because they sparked curiosity. The headmaster narrowed his eyes for a second. The image shifted, focusing on a clearing filled with leaves and branches. In the center of it, a boy was still lying on the ground. The same professor, now intrigued, pointed at the screen. "That one, he hasn't moved since he arrived. Is something wrong with that student?" Kane was lying among the branches, eyes closed, like he was just resting. The headmaster let out a faint smile. "Indeed, this year's students are quite peculiar." The image of the forest remained still. Kane, now in the forest, was staring at the message in front of him. Test system: individual ranking, objective, earn points. Eliminate magical creatures. Collect crystals from defeated monsters. Cooperation between participants is allowed. Warning: crystals and artifacts disappear after being registered on the bracelet. Monster classifications: Class 1 to 3. Higher rewards come with higher risks. Kane stood up. The message faded into particles of light. He hadn't stayed still out of laziness. He was just deciding what to do. Others were already running around, eager to collect points as fast as possible. He began walking calmly through the forest. He could earn points by defeating weak creatures and collecting the crystals they left behind. Or he could try taking down a Class 2 or even a Class 3 monster. But being registered as a Class 2 mage, facing a Class 3 right away might not be the smartest move. Teaming up with other students was also an option. The Academy made that clear in the message. It was obvious they wanted to see how students handled freedom. Would they form alliances or see each other as rivals? But there was another way to earn points, one Kane always used during the tutorial. He chuckled to himself as he kicked a small rock along the path. Man! This is so wrong. Elena was in combat with a Class 2 monster. The creature was tall, made of living stone covered in magical moss. Its hands formed jagged blades, and the force it gave off was enough to shatter a tree. She narrowly dodged a vertical strike. Crack! The stone blade slammed into the ground, carving a shallow crack. With a sharp motion, Elena stretched out her arm and cast her magic. The scarlet flame gathered around her hand, taking shape. Within seconds, a crimson spear spun in the air, pulsing with spiritual energy. VUSH. She threw it with precision. The weapon shot through the air like a crimson streak, slicing forward until it struck the monster's shoulder. Thram! The impact forced the creature to stagger. The area hit was smoldering, as if its magical essence was breaking apart. The stone golem growled, stumbling. Elena seized the moment, already preparing her next move. She raised her hand, and 3 small orbs of basic fire magic appeared around her. Basic, but effective. With a quick gesture, she launched all 3 at the monster's core. Fudge! 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 The explosions sent waves of heat and dust into the air. The creature dropped to its knees, its mana destabilized, body breaking down. KRRRSHH. When it tried to rise, its body was already crumbling into fragments of stone. Even though golems were strong and durable, having their core destroyed was always fatal. In the center of the remains, a small crystal floated, pulsing with magical energy. Elena calmly stepped forward and picked it up. She touched it to the bracelet on her wrist and waited as the system registered the collection. The item glowed for a few seconds before fully absorbing the crystal. The numbers on the display changed. Current points, 67. She took a deep breath, eyes still locked on the bracelet. Looks like coming here alone was really worth it. She knew the past. And she knew what was coming. When the test began, she went straight to one of the regions where Class 2 monsters were known to appear. Those areas weren't marked on the map. But she remembered. The longer she took to eliminate the monsters there, the greater the risk of other students showing up. And the more people appeared, the lower her chances of earning points. While checking her score, Elena felt something strange. A presence behind her. She spun around by reflex and saw a girl finishing a spell. Water shaped itself into a sharp, narrow spear in front of her. The shot came before Elena could even think. A fast, precise stream. There was no time to dodge. Impossible. Elena raised her arm immediately. The scarlet flames burst from her palm as an instinctive defense. The water spear crashed into the improvised flame barrier. Boom! The impact wasn't gentle. Elena was thrown back, rolling through leaves and branches until she stopped, kneeling on the ground. A dense mist formed from the clash of both spells, filling the area. Silence followed for a few seconds. But within the mist, a weak flame still flickered. The embers of the scarlet flame burned around Elena's body, like a broken but still working armor. Her bracelet gave off a faint red pulse. The system had detected a potential critical hit, triggering an alert. If Elena took another significant blow, she would be eliminated from the test. Of course, being eliminated wasn't the end. Those who were knocked out lost 30% of their total points. And if they were eliminated by another student, those points would go directly to them. TSK. I really planned to take you out before you could fight back. On the other side, Iris Valen narrowed her eyes. She hadn't expected that. Elena coughed once and dusted off her clothes. She stood back up, her body still aching, but her gaze steady. Damn. I didn't think Iris would show up here. Iris Valen. The kind of presence that demanded respect, even without trying. With smooth, light blue hair and deep, calm eyes like a still lake, she always seemed too composed. But it was just an illusion. Her pure water magic wasn't like anyone else's. It didn't create waves or explosions. It moved as if it were part of her body. Well. I'm sorry to disappoint you. The flames around Elena began to stir again. Slowly, they spun around her right hand, taking a denser form. She raised her arm. Let's see if you can put this out. Chapter 04, Shadows in the Forest. Kane had just finished taking down a monster with a weird humanoid look. Grayish skin and limbs way too long for its body. The creature hit the ground with a dry thud, dissolving into black particles right after. Kane stepped back a little, rotating his right wrist. He could still feel the vibration of the repulsion echoing through his bones. He had used Vector Fist, one of the game character's moves, to break the monster's guard and finish it with a quick burst from behind. If I push too hard, I'll end up snapping my arm. He looked at the bracelet. His score was slowly going up, but he didn't care much. He was still running tests. Kane stopped for a second, closed his eyes, and slowly stretched his hands out. He felt the lines of repulsion around him. Truly felt them. Now he could fully understand those tiny invisible tensions in the air, like strings of force between him and the world around. That was how he activated his skill, by tweaking the direction and strength of the impacts he wanted to release. In the game it all worked automatically, but here, I gotta feel it, measure it, and adjust too. He planted his feet and focused his energy into them, launching himself backwards. He flew about 3 meters, touched the ground, and slid until he stopped. Ha, that's new. The repulsion reacted stronger. Like the lines were denser here in the physical world than in the game simulation. Rustle, rustle. A noise in the bushes caught Kane's attention. It was quiet, but fast. He turned immediately, activating contact deflection by instinct. A magical boar leapt out from the foliage, its eyes glowing and tusks coated in mana. The creature charged straight at him, full speed and rage. As soon as it hit Kane's body, an invisible pulse exploded around him. The boar was thrown sideways like it had smashed into a force wall. That was close. Contact deflection didn't last long. 2 seconds max. But in that moment, the repulsion zone wrapped around Kane was enough to block anything that touched him. The boar charged again. Kane sidestepped and shoved it with a short repulsion shot. Thump! The hit threw it off balance. Kane moved in, charging power into his right fist as he slammed it into the boar's ribs. Thram! Its body flew into a tree. Here, take another little breeze. Kane stretched out his hand and finished it off with another repulsion blast, smashing it into the trunk before it even hit the ground. The bracelet beeped. Plus 13 points, he took a deep breath. He stared at the bracelet. Looks like when they don't drop crystals, it just gives you a flat score. Alright, time to test this properly. Kane turned and started walking deeper into the forest, looking for a more interesting enemy. That side of the forest was dead quiet. The leaves barely moved, and the air felt heavier. Elena clenched the cloth between her teeth, trying to suppress the pain as she tied a bandage around her left arm.
NNH.
A small groan slipped from her lips. She remembered the fight with Iris. She barely made it out, thanks to something she pulled off using a trick from her past life. A blurry memory, but it worked. She sighed and muttered, "Sorry, Iris, ended up using something I learned somewhere else." She looked down, still pressing the cloth over the cut. "But you also attacked me from behind, you really were." Realizing she was about to say something a bit too harsh for a bunch of teenagers, she stopped before cursing. Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then stood up slowly, leaning against the tree.
"I just need to hold on until the test ends."
Looking at her bracelet, she saw there were still 43 minutes left. She had 152 points. If she got knocked out, she'd lose 30% of that.
Still, it would be enough to stay in the top 20. But that wasn't what she wanted. She needed more.
She needed to be at the top, get into the best classes, with the most sought-after instructors. This was her second chance.
Her new life. And she wasn't planning on wasting it.
"This is my second chance, and I'm not making the same mistakes." She kept walking, stepping carefully between roots and dry branches. For a while, the only sound was her own breathing. Until she heard something. Like footsteps.
Someone was close.
Shit. She turned immediately, shifting into a combat stance without even thinking, even with her injured arm. But the one who came out from between the trees wasn't a monster. It was someone she knew all too well. Tall, dark brown hair, eyes a sharp grayish-green. He had the proud stance of a warrior and the relaxed walk of someone who knew exactly what they were worth.
Raiden Velmar. A well-known name among the young elite. Elena knew him well.
Not just because of his famous family, but because they had worked together before, in the future. He watched her for a few seconds, then spoke.
"It's okay. I'm not gonna fight you."
She kept her guard up a second longer, then let out a soft sigh and relaxed her shoulders.
"Well, if you say so."
Raiden took a few steps until he was beside her.
Elena still kept a bit of distance, but she didn't seem worried anymore. "You don't look so good."
"I've been worse."
Raiden raised an eyebrow, curious. "Worse than this?"
He thought it, but didn't say it out loud.
What kind of training would make someone like her see this as nothing?
He wanted to ask but held back as the two started walking.
"It's nothing serious."
"If it was, I would have been eliminated already." They exchanged a few words as they moved through the forest.
"Nothing deep. At least not for Elena."
Raiden, on the other hand, seemed more focused than he let on.
"Wait, really?" "Yeah. I got 178 points. You were really aiming for first place." "Well, you're not slacking either." Elena looked away and, for a second, glanced at herself. Her academy uniform was torn in a few places, especially on the left side.
The bottom of her pants was caked in dried mud, and the sleeves still had dark blood stains. The makeshift bandage on her recently injured arm was tight, but barely hid the wound. The sweat on her face had already dried, but left clear marks. Stray strands of hair kept sticking to her forehead. Any noble girl her age would have screamed seeing that mess.
Elena, just like Raiden, was taking things seriously. But why? Anyone could have asked that. Elena also came from a prestigious family. The Great House Elrian, known for wielding the legendary Scarlet Flame.
So why go so hard? Why push herself like this on the very first test? She shook her head gently, like brushing off a memory before it could fully form.
Elena's mind wanted to go back.
To remember the real reason behind all of this.
But she didn't like that. The past wasn't something she wanted to relive. Raiden noticed.
He had been watching in silence until then, and said in a light tone, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone here.
Just do things your own way."
Elena turned her face slightly toward him, surprised. But she didn't respond.
She only thought, "What is this? Am I getting life advice from a kid? Looks like I'm got." Elena stopped mid-sentence.
Her body froze for a second.
A presence was approaching. Raiden felt it too.
His hand was already resting on his sword, ready for anything. Both stared toward the trail covered in bushes and twisted trees, where that flow of mana was coming from.
What do you think, Elena? A monster? No. The mana is way too stable for that. Raiden's eyes stayed sharp. If he wants to fight, things might get messy. From within the vegetation, footsteps crunched over dry leaves.
A shadow appeared. Shoulders relaxed, light hair a bit messy, and half-lidded eyes, a dull red. His posture was way too calm for the situation.
That guy, here? Raiden thought, already on alert. Cain walked straight toward them. Elena didn't take her eyes off him for a second. She didn't look surprised.
Or scared. But there was something strange on her face.
Something Raiden couldn't read.
Raiden stared at Cain, who kept coming toward them.
Is he looking for a fight? I can handle myself, but what about Elena? Cain kept getting closer. Raiden glanced quickly at Elena. She still hadn't looked away. Damn, if he tries anything against Elena, we've got a problem. Raiden got ready. Hands tight on the hilt of his sword.
His mind ran through tactics, positioning, possible moves, ways to counter.
I can manage, but I can't fight while protecting Elena. I don't even know his abilities.
This could go south for her.
How's he gonna strike? What's his range? How does he? Cain walked right past them. He was fiddling with his bracelet, pressing buttons. Why won't this stupid thing work?
He muttered under his breath, trying to register the magic crystal in his hand. Raiden followed him with his eyes.
Cain didn't look at them. Didn't acknowledge them. Didn't say a word. It was like they didn't even exist.
And for some reason, that bothered Raiden more than if they had been attacked. He kept staring at Cain's back, until he vanished into the bushes.
Why didn't he do anything? Raiden asked himself. He had so many chances to strike. Even if he didn't want to fight, letting someone get that close without warning was insane during a test. But he didn't do anything. Raiden turned, looking to Elena for some kind of answer.
But what he saw made him stop.
She wasn't angry. Or tense. Or relieved. Her expression was calm. It looked sad. A look of pity. Raiden didn't get it. Pity. Why? What did that guy have that made Elena look at him like that? Chapter 05. At the end of the exam.
Cain was walking through the forest with a clear goal in mind.
He looked at the bracelet, 63 points? Well, better than nothing. It wasn't a bad score, but most of Class S was probably somewhere between 60 and 80. Cain wanted to push a bit higher. Even if things were different from the game, he could still orient himself on the map. Boom! A distant explosion echoed, followed by subtle tremors in the ground. Cain heard the sound and raised an eyebrow. Finally getting close. Boom! Another heavy impact shook the forest. He turned his head, red eyes narrowing. It came from that direction.
Without hesitation, Cain continued walking south on the map.
He glanced at the bracelet again. 10 minutes left until the exam ended.
As he got closer, the noise became clear.
Shouts echoed between the trees.
They weren't cries of despair, but of combat, quick commands, students calling to each other, trying to coordinate their attacks and cover. Cain approached silently, stopping behind a moss-covered rock ledge. Ahead, a wide battlefield opened between the trees. The ground was torn up, cracked, and scorched in several spots. Fallen trees formed improvised barricades, some still smoldering. In the center of the makeshift arena, a Class 3 monster ruled the area. The creature had a colossal, symmetrical body, like a mix between a magical beast and an ancient machine. It had 4 long arms covered in gleaming mineral plates, and its skin pulsed with glowing veins of living mana, flickering in shades of blue and violet. Its face was hidden behind a cracked metal mask, 2 yellow eyes shining through the slits. Cain watched from above, arms crossed over the stone. He saw a group of 6 students struggling against time and exhaustion. They were clearly worn out, clothes torn, dried blood on their hands, sweat dripping down their faces. Each attack required coordination, but not all of them were in sync. 2 of them were already down, lying outside the main combat zone, likely drained. A dark-haired boy in reinforced armor shouted urgently, gripping a cracked magic spear. "Watch the tail!" On the other side of the arena, a girl with short silver hair raised her hands, conjuring a wind barrier around her teammates. "Now, all together!" A third student, blonde and covered in soot from head to toe, pointed to the sky as he noticed a shift in the monster's movement. "It's jumping again! Get ready!" The boss's attack patterns were ridiculous compared to real monsters. Even being a Class 3, it still felt restricted, too artificial. Kane looked at the bracelet again. "Only 5 minutes left. Looks like I made it just in time. HNN. HNN. He let out a dry, amused chuckle through his nose. "Too bad, for them." His gaze returned to the group. They shouted, ran, cast spells, and tried to catch the monster off guard, but it still fought back with power. Time was an invisible enemy, and every lost second was a chance slipping away. Kane observed in silence. Like a hunter watching its prey being surrounded, just waiting for the right moment to strike. Among the students, one figure stood out without saying a word. Amid the chaos, she stood tall and focused, like the gravitational center of the whole scene. Her long, dark hair was pulled into a ponytail, tied with a blue ribbon that looked like it was meant for a wrist. Her pale skin reflected the glow of magic around her, and her incredibly blue eyes seemed to absorb every detail of the battlefield like mirrors of mana. Yen. Unlike the others, she didn't yell. Her commands came through gestures and sharp, efficient words. While the others distracted the monster, she stepped back a few paces, gathering energy around her hands. Crystals of ice began to form around her. As expected, she's holding back. Kane knew Yen's abilities. He knew that wasn't one of her strongest spells. She avoided using her full power because she still didn't trust her control completely. The circle of ice beneath her feet expanded, and then dozens of frozen spears formed in the air, launching precisely at the boss. Clang! The attack made the monster stumble back, shattering part of its metallic shoulder plating. But it wasn't enough. The beast roared in fury, the sound echoing through the nearby trees. Its yellow eyes locked onto Yen. She had become the target. They were close to winning. If they had more time, maybe they could have brought the monster down on their own. But time wasn't on their side. 1 minute left. Kane slowly rolled his right arm, warming up his shoulder. The gesture was simple, like an athlete about to start a race. Down below, the monster charged. Yen sensed the killing intent before she even saw it. The monster came at her full force, all 4 arms raised, ready to crush. Damn! I won't dodge that in time. She started conjuring a wall of ice in front of her body, but her arms trembled. Her mana was nearly drained. She had spent too much keeping the smaller spells going, afraid of losing control. I wasted too much time on this Class 3 monster. If I knew I'd fall here, I would have aimed lower. Time remaining in the exam, 32 seconds. Alright then. Let's do this. Kane jumped from the rock, heading straight into the arena. Time seemed to slow. The forest sounds vanished for a moment. The air grew heavy. The embers still flickering on the ground wavered as if the world itself was holding its breath. Kane descended in a straight line, posture firm, body perfectly aligned. He was falling fast, but his speed gradually slowed, as if something invisible was holding him. Greyera hour. The monster roared in rage, charging straight at Yen. Yen, move! One of the students shouted. She was still finishing her ice barrier, her fingers trembling, her magic unstable. And then, she saw him. He appeared between them. His body had fallen from above, but it slowed midair as if floating. He landed gently, barely raising any dust. His white hair swayed lightly from the soft impact. Yen recognized him instantly.
even from behind. Even without seeing his face. The energy surrounding him was unique. He was the same boy from the training field she had seen the day before. Alright, let's test this. Cain stretched one hand forward. The other remained in his coat pocket. The air around him seemed to tremble. Leaves quivered even without wind. An invisible tension built up. The monster swung its arm in a brutal, downward strike. Cain opened his hand. Voom! The sound was like a muffled explosion, a silent implosion. Invisible force shot forward in a straight line. Thoom! The impact exploded at the center of the monster's chest. A shockwave rippled through the entire arena. The students were pushed back several steps. Dust shot upward. The sound was felt more than heard, like internal pressure shaking their bones. When the vision cleared, a clean, deep hole had opened in the creature's chest. The monster dropped to its knees and disintegrated into black particles. At the center, a golden crystal slowly rose into the air. When the dust settled, all they could see was Cain standing in front of the crystal, tapping his bracelet. Plus 90 points, he held the golden crystal in his hands, unhurried. But since he had only arrived at the end of the battle, he didn't receive any participation points. A shame. Still, he kept the full points from the crystal. Seconds later, a notification flashed on the bracelets of everyone else involved in the battle, plus 50 participation points, collaboration in Class 3 creature defeat. Yen, still standing near the center of the battlefield, looked at her own wrist. She now had 123 points. One of the students shouted upon seeing Cain walking away with the crystal. Hey! He stole the crystal. But Cain didn't react. He just stared at his bracelet screen as the crystal disappeared. Before anyone could say another word, a new message appeared for everyone. Exam concluded, returning to main arena. One by one, their bodies began to be surrounded by luminous particles, fading out from the quiet arena. But in that brief moment before disappearing, Yen saw something no one else noticed. Cain brought his hand to the lower part of his face, wiping quickly just below his nose. A thin trail of blood was there, subtle but visible. It was a quiet sign that the attack had taken more from him than anyone could tell.